Welcome back to Beyond Zenith, the podcast where we go beyond the title and explore the real stories behind technology leaders. I'm Nicola Moss, co-founder of Zenithro, and today I'm joined by Richard Herbert, Chief Technology Officer at Cloudforce. Richard, welcome. Great to have you on the episode.
Hi, Nicola. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How are you today? You feeling good?
Feeling really good. I've seen snow, I've seen rain, I've seen sunshine. It makes me think of home, like Melbourne.
Very nice, a whole mix of weather at the moment. So, Richard, for people listening who may not know your background, can you walk us through your journey and how you ended up becoming CTO at Cloudforce?
Sure. I have been in technology for 30 years. I think I started my first kind of technology role or business in 1995. I'm lucky enough, to be a part of the original kind of business internet evolution. I was making websites when almost no one was on the internet, and I would go around with the major telecommunication provider at the time in Australia with their reps, and they were trying to sell people, modems and connections, and I would sell them websites. I had a brochure with a graph on for the number of people that were joining the internet every month, and told them they had to be in it to win it. So I started early. I had a really mixed career before then. I hadn't settled easily into anything. I really loved things like aviation. I was a pilot and I did aviation theory. So when the internet came along, I built aviation training sites for pilots to get accreditation. And I just basically did anything that crossed my desk, and it was a really exciting time. So that led me on to a couple of bigger businesses. I actually ended up building an internet division for a telecommunications company, doing it more at scale. I met some amazing creative people and technologists, and then I started to get a bit more serious about the B2B side of software. So I had an early business mentor who had an aeroplane at the flying field that I had my pilot's license at, and I mean, it very much attracted me, this guy with this really cool aeroplane. And he saw what I was doing and said, oh, hey, you need to come and learn more about software, do this properly. So he kind of took me under his wing, and his business was actually point of sale systems. And I learned then that I didn't really want to work in financial software. There was a lot of data and all of it was numbers, and it wasn't terribly interesting, but I did learn a lot about the craft from him. And then, after a couple of other businesses and interesting projects, I did the Organ Donor Registry of Australia, all sorts of things. I ended up with a fledgling business that was focused on recruiting the next generation of engineers in Australia. So engineering is a discipline where there's a ton of different specializations, and it's pretty challenging for graduates coming out of their tertiary education to find the right kind of employment. And so we actually built a resume builder that was specifically for engineers. So we started niche, and it was very successful, and it grew really quickly, and we got the attention of some larger employers, and we actually had three sort of key clients that started off: Ford Motor Company, Accenture, and a mining company, Mount Isa Mines. And we built one of the first e-recruitment systems in the world, and really kind of led the evolution of e-recruitment and talent management online through many, many years. And we ended up specializing in kind of process intensive industries and federal government. And today, almost everyone in the federal government in Australia uses that system to be employed. And it specializes in doing it fairly. It deals with nepotism and racism and sexism and all the downsides of humans looking for humans. And I feel it's greatly improved the federal government of Australia. So took that system over to America once we had the monopoly in Australia, and had my first taste of doing business in America. The checks are bigger. There's more people, there's more business, everything happens quicker. I'd always been a Microsoft fan, having used Microsoft technologies like SQL Server, and it was kind of exciting to be, in the country where that stuff was invented. And, we were successful in bringing the business out to America. And yeah, we exited a few years after that, and I, having, worked on one product and one technology stack for 15 years, I was really curious about everything else that was happening. So started a boutique agency just to give myself maximum exposure to every other problem domain and every other technology stack. And learn a ton of different things. So much had happened in 15 years. The cloud had been happening. Single page applications had gotten quite robust and scalable, and I just built a lot of interesting, projects and platforms and products for people until I was kind of satiated. And throughout this whole time, I'd been in contact with Hussein, who's the founder of Cloudforce. I'd met him previously, which we'll get to, but working with my business, and he'd always wanted me to come back to America and build something for him. He really was attracted to the software kind of business model of recurring revenue, which is, is a really nice business model if you can get it off the ground. So there's a long tail at the beginning of those businesses and a long tail at the end, but if you can get them going, they're really, really profitable. And then when Gen AI happened, it was just too exciting not to be a part of that. So came over to America, and we built Nebula One.
Wow, what a story, Richard. That's your career is amazing.
Look, I'm lucky. I was always open to opportunities. I do say this to people. It's not so much that you make luck happen. It's not a predetermined or a intentional thing. It's much more about being open to the opportunities that do come your way and to be able to see them for what they are and be willing to take risks. Because essentially, at 25, I'd been through a number of different jobs and industries. I'd worked in the courts, I'd worked in aviation, and I just felt I was ready to take a chance on myself and start a business on my own. I think I'd pretty much understood by that stage that I was not easily managed by people. I'd had that feedback directly. You're not easy to manage. And I just, in my 25-year-old brain, I thought, well, maybe I don't need to be managed. I'm okay with who I am and what I do. Maybe if I'm my own manager, I, won't get into these difficult situations. And it was very much like that. And I got started and never looked back. And I'm a really big fan of businesses, entrepreneurship, of people starting and making things. As a species, we're very good at iterating over things, improving and seeing ways to do them better. And I think that's what the role of businesses play, is to, in a competitive marketplace, to see an opportunity to maybe do it a little bit differently or a bit better, and then the whole world takes a step forward. I love that.
Wow, amazing. You have such a good view on how you see it. And a lot of people would want to grow a business and then exit like you have. Or I don't know if it'll be easy to kind of simplify, but like, what's the secret sauce to that? Like, what is it?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, and I don't think there's one answer. If there was, we'd all just do that thing. If it starts with seeing an opportunity and being able to prosecute that, in the middle is a ton of grind. So, it yourself, as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things you have to do because there's no one else to do them. And you just have to do them sometimes thanklessly in the middle of the night. So there's a real, the sweat equity is real in a business. And so unless you're gifted to land a big investment check really early and suddenly have all the money you need, you're going to do a lot of that yourself. So persistence, but also just good business acumen, understanding how a business is modeled and how to game it out. In the beginning, you start with a plan and it's never going to happen exactly according to that plan, but without the plan, you don't know what to adjust when things change. And so if you're going to do your experiments and figure out what works, you have to kind of be organised around that. And then I think, too, is probably not trying to do it all on your own. I had some exceptional business partners, and you definitely need people that are not like you, that have strengths for your weaknesses and otherwise. And also, when it gets really hard and you get discouraged, to have that other person still marching on, helps us do it, and then we become that for the other person. So I think if I was going to summarize like where I've seen businesses really succeed, it's when there's been really successful partnerships. So more than one person that is committed to the same goal and the vision and pooling their resources to make it happen, which, that's humanity, right? We are a collective species. We pool our resources to survive the winters. We build communities to nourish us when we need it, and it's exactly the same in business. So, yeah.
And was there any moments throughout that where you were like, I can't do this anymore, or you don't think it's going to work?
Oh, absolutely, right? There's a fallacy that the founder is this person who's got limitless wisdom and strength and has just, marched down the road to success. It's not like that at all. I mean, there's many, many times. I mean, you know, in IT, there's always going to be unpleasant surprises. So even though, I was really lucky in that we went 15 years under sort of sustained attack from external threat actors with that product, because we hosted, the Department of Defence and Federal Police and things like that. We were a target for overseas malicious actors. So we never had an incident where we lost data. There were still times when things happened. I myself, deleted someone's production database in the middle of a graduate campaign. Not too proud to admit that. Your DR works when you have to do it for real. So just being able to be straight with customers and say, this is what happened and this is what we'll do for next time. I definitely learned that, and that was that it's more about the way that you respond and that you treat your customers in a crisis and how honest you are with them that matters. People tolerate mistakes if they can understand them, and if you direct with people and don't try and hide things and show that you're improving to mitigate those risks in the future, you can build really strong, long, durable relationships with customers. You don't have to be perfect. I think it's a real myth out there that there are no bugs in production, that somehow this Uber team will never release a mistake or do something wrong. It's way more about the fact that you see that for what it is, communicate it clearly, and get on with it. So yeah, I mean, there were many dark times. We went from I've lived through the global financial crisis, the dot-com boom, when things were crashing down and businesses were going under, and I think there were many moments of doubt in that, but I think that faith as a founder you have in the vision and trying to get it done will see you through those times.
Yeah, sounds amazing. And I guess when there's tough times, it shows your partners or your customers like how you can really partner together and how you actually act when that happens. But it must obviously not be nice at the time.
No, it's not nice to look people in the eye and say, we took your site down, and all those candidates. So I mean, it was a recruitment system. So they weren't staff. These were people external to the organisation trying to apply for jobs, and graduates. The competition for the top graduates was really ferocious. So you were building that employment brand with your customers while these candidates came through, and if they had a bad experience, it was their brand that was impacted. So looking those HR directors in the eye and saying, I did this was pretty tough. Yeah.
But you did very well, which was good. So, um, and then I know you mentioned in the beginning you were doing a lot, and you hadn't got into technology yet. And I think you mentioned about like a business mentor, potentially that pulled you in. So I was going to ask what originally pulled you into technology. Was that mentor, or was there anything else?
No, like it started at home. So my wife got a computer to do her university degree, and the minute that thing came in the house, I was fascinated by it. Right, I'd always wanted to know how things worked. My favourite books were those little how it's made books. Wanting to see how every little thing came apart, and I just got really intimate with that computer. I pulled it apart and put it back together so many times. I think I frustrated my wife a lot because she was trying to use it to write essays and I'd have it in pieces on the table. And that started that way. And then when I went to be a pilot, I found my people, like these guys were also into computers, and the guy that owned the flying school was very much into computers, and he saw it immediately and said, hey, you should do more of this. And so that's when I built things. So, I built a logbook application for the pilots at the flying school. And then when the internet happened, he said, oh, this is something really real. Let's do something with this. So I actually started my first business with that guy. And we just focused on aviation websites. And it was just a really heady time of no one had any tools. The browsers were all really different. It was really, really difficult to make websites in the early days. And I was really tenacious. And because it was a level playing field, right, there were no established players, it was the quick that won the day, and I was lucky in that I was quick at it. So we made a ton of progress, but others were just sort of trying it out. Yeah.
Sounds like you have a real passion for it, like technology.
I love it, absolutely. I was a nightmare at school. Like my arts teacher and my English, they loved me. Anything creative, I was absolutely the best student in the class, and anything I had to rote learn, was disastrous. You know, my maths teacher hated me, my history teacher hated me, you know, and so I think in all of that was just a real curiosity and a kind of precociousness, which I can see now is probably really irritating when they were trying to keep me to a syllabus. But computers were like that. It was just this wide open space where you could run ahead of the formally educated and you know the state of the art and just do something new, and there were no barriers. Like it was just as much as you wanted to learn, and it absolutely that resonated really strongly with me. And I just didn't accept that you couldn't learn how to do something if you just want to sit down and do it. So you know, I picked up the books, I did courses, and then I just learned the programming languages, and that's still true today. I mean, you know, when we recruit here for developers, I'm not looking for someone with 3 degrees. You know, I want to see your GitHub. I want to see what you make. And the same applies if people are curious and go out and, you know, acquire skills and knowledge and do things. They're just as, you know, they're very useful people. So, yeah.
And then when did your focus shift from building systems to building teams?
Well, so early on, I really loved working alone, and then when I got brought into this software business, I saw sort of the team working. Unfortunately, that was a really bad experience because that team was not great. So honestly, I learned a lot more from, I think, people's mistakes than being shown the best way to do something, which I think can be a really great way to absorb that, especially with people. So, you know, I went from that business into another smaller business, but then when an opportunity opened to build a real team, I think I was really coming out of those environments where I'd seen people making mistakes, like people mistakes, and so I was determined not to remake those. And I was building an internet division for a telecommunications company, and I had, you know, some really good individual contributors. So I had some strong programmers, some really strong creative people, and at that stage I hadn't really learned how to make all that work, so I was the glue running around all the time. And I think coming out of that experience was where I realised that there was a whole art to, you know, management and team growth and, you know, getting more than just the sum of the individual parts. And so the next business, which was really the one I founded, that, you know, the e-recruitment business, I set about much more finding people that wanted to work together. And that was really where I saw the synergy of people that really want to work together, cooperating, producing something much more than just they would have on their own. And I think I was really lucky in that business with some of the early employees, that they were just fantastic teammates and showed me just how well bonded a team could become on a mission. And I think I've had that as a template ever since.
So do you, when you look at teams, do you look at it as like pieces to a puzzle and putting it together?
Look, if only it were that easy. I think, interestingly, when you're building a team from scratch, what you're going to do is adapt as you go, because the people that you bring on are all going to come in different shapes and sizes, so you don't know which ones you're going to find first. I really believe that you absolutely need a mix of people. So software is a very creative endeavour, but you need organisers. So, you know, you're going to have people that have ideas all day long and want to execute on them, and then you've got the finishers who like seeing something well built, and then you need the people who know how to organise, you know, work streams and the flow of information through a team, and the time and motion stuff. And they're really different people. But in the right team, I think everybody really appreciates what the other is doing, because it's usually something they don't like doing, right? So I think when you start a team from scratch, you're definitely finding interesting people, and you're measuring them against, you know, the kind of capabilities you want. But as you bring them on, you know, you're slowly filling the bingo board so that it gets more and more sort of targeted as you round the team out. I think for an established team that has, you know, strong working relationships and good tooling and good practices, you know, it's kind of easier because you've got a momentum that you can drop people into that you know will eventually, you know, get them all spinning the same way.
Yeah.
But building a team from scratch, yeah, you do need to have strong practitioners for the key roles.
Nice. That's a really good way to look at it, and probably why you're so successful in that area.
Been lucky. I've worked with some amazing people, Nicola. Really, really good people.
Yeah, I do think it's yourself as well. Like you pick some, you know how to like put the different people together, and I don't know if all leaders will do that as well, to be fair. So
I, Yeah, I mean, like I can't comment more broadly. I mean, I've certainly seen. So part of our talent management product that we had, we did a lot of performance management, so succession planning, capability mapping, all that. So I have seen the more dry sort of metrics-driven management approaches, but honestly, for most high-performing teams that I've really witnessed up close, it's a personal investment. Like you are personally invested in someone's well-being, which means in the work context, that means giving them a life, like letting them be sustained by the other pillars of life, not just work, but being organised in a way that when people are ready to work, that you can take what they do and make use of it. I think there's a very negative experience that happens with software teams when they build things that don't come to light. I mean, talking to a team member's partner recently, their whole business is coming to a close, and everything they've done in the last 3.5 years is essentially going in the dustbin, and that's really hard for you to commit a good part of your career and your creative output into a project that doesn't go somewhere. It can be really, really hard. And the flip side is when you build something that is successful, it buoys everybody with it because everybody knows what they've done. And when you have that connection to the mission, so we are, transforming Australia's federal workforce. We are transforming education with equitable, AI for all. That's powerful. And I think when people have that purpose and know that what they're doing counts, it goes a long way to making them happy and stable. And then if you just are a decent human being about it and don't overwork people and listen to them and allow them to be human, there are good days and bad days. I think that people feel that and they reciprocate. And then when everyone does that, you have a really great team because everybody will look after each other and it'll get you through any manner of crises in a tough spot. Yeah.
Nice. And then going back to yourself, if you look back over your career, were there like 2 or 3 moments that really shaped you as a leader, would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in that first large business, we went through our initial investment and had to let a ton of people go. That was a really tough moment, and I think both myself and my other business partner then both were quite, changed by that. It's not that we didn't take it seriously, but I think when you're only looking at growth and you're only pushing forwards, you do take risks, and so. Happy to say after that, I've never had to do that again. And I think part of that is by being a little bit more conservative about how we plan and execute on plans. So that was one experience. I think going through from an initial product and application to like a mature, multi-tenant SaaS scalable solution, like there's just tons of lessons that go into that, like really hard lessons, having to start applications over again. It's really tough to stand in front of the board and say, we can't develop this version anymore. We really have to work on the next version, and there's going to be, a year's worth of R&D that's not going to return a dollar, for quite a time. That's a really tough thing to do. So, that's definitely shaped my thinking today. We work on our product, I very much balance, technical debt and very much, try and optimize for the ability to develop new functionality and keep working on it without throwing it away. It's quite challenging to do that, especially as things change as rapidly as they are now. But that was definitely a moment, having to redo those systems and seeing the pain, at the executive and the board level of having to invest at a time when other, products were maybe bringing more features to market and we were redoing our platform. So they were very strong experiences. And then I think having left that business and leaving behind a team and knowing what that meant to everybody, I think that really shaped it. Like I built some lifelong relationships out of that really sustain me today, and those people will always come back and work on whatever we do, which is amazing. So I mean, maybe not so much moments, but big experiences.
Nice. That must have been tough, like speaking to the board and saying that. But I guess sometimes you have to go back to go forward in a way.
Yeah, and look, you could use lots of euphemisms to, to make it sound more usual. But essentially, what you've done is you've let technical debt get to a level where it's, where the cost of more development on that is beyond, or you've hit some scalability limits. So can't put more customers, more users, more something through this the way it is. I mean, to be fair to us, we were developing, we started this application in 1999, and so the internet changed a lot, technology changed a lot. Even the stack that we'd built that in was bought and sold by three different companies over that time. So, we were coping with a lot of technological change, but it was not easy.
Can imagine. And then you founded Escape Velocity, which you spoke about was very successful, and now operate as CTO at Cloudforce. How different is it leading as a founder versus operating inside an organization?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to lie. I think stepping back into a company with meetings and processes and policies and all the things that are necessary, in a larger business was it was a bit of a culture shock all over again. I really enjoyed stepping away from that. I'm not a strong, like I don't adhere to the rules. I'm not really a rule follower. I'm a pretty good corporate citizen. Like my expense report's really tight. I don't want to make nightmares for admin, but in terms of policies and procedures and those things, it's not my favourite thing. But it is necessary. So it's a tricky balance. You've got to give people enough of a clean operating environment that they know how to get things done within the company, at the same time as giving people the freedom to go get creative. So yeah, it's not been easy, but interestingly, I've actually adapted better than I thought I would have. I had a lot of hesitation coming back into this world, um, but I can see when the team are dedicated to building it the right way, and so you're not doing things in a meaningless fashion. So the policies are there so people know where they stand. HR is there so that people are well informed as to their rights and benefits, and they just understand how they need to get what they can. Operationally, there's a lot of moving pieces in a larger organisation that have to work on time for everything to happen smoothly, from car parks to company events. So it's all necessary. Um, yeah, and I've done my best to adapt.
Well, you're
Yeah.
doing a good job of it so far by the sounds of things. And I think also that's probably why you're so good at building teams and the team that I love you, just because you kind of see the grey area and you kind of get the bit that some people don't get. And I think that's taken for granted because you don't see that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had some interesting experiences with other executives. I think any concentration of power is a dangerous thing, and I've definitely seen people lose sight of the humanity. And at one level, a corporation itself is kind of a sociopathic entity. Really, it's going to put the needs of the shareholders above the needs of the employees, and I think you've seen that play out in corporate America over and over. So people are wary of that. So to be a human and just try and bridge that gap, I think is a really vital role for leaders, and good leaders do that. Um, and honestly, you can coerce people, like you could work in the power dimension and make people do things. But I think if you're going to build a sustainable operation, people have to want to be there. They really do. And honestly, the effort that goes into directing people that are self-directed, that want to do that thing, is so much less than it takes to make everybody do it the way that you want it if it's not the same. And so the trick is to do it in a way that you all go in the one direction. So that's the yeah. Well, I mean, even within a development team, so there's a myth that in high performing teams that everybody's on the same page, and it's not true. And it's usually people just being quiet. I think it always is a good strategy to ask the quiet people their opinions, because they've often got the most thoughtful things to say. And if you just accept that there will be disagreements and that it's going to be robust at times, but that you commit, like you can disagree and commit, and still move forward. And I think as everybody gets a seat at the table and a say in a decision, then over time people come to accept that, or trust that the not getting their way every time isn't going to be the end of their career or the product. Yeah.
And it's nice because they feel safe. You have good flow state, and when you just get to tell someone to do because it's I'm the boss, like you have to do it. you probably don't get the good quality or as longevity in terms of that actual change. So I can imagine why you're so
Yeah,
successful in that area.
yeah. I mean, that would, to me, having a sustainable output over the long term is faster than having crunches and misses. So, I've definitely seen teams under a lot of pressure have to meet a deadline, but expecting them to come up with a good idea the next week is probably a bridge too far. Whereas when you work sustainably and people, I say to people, bring me 40 of your best, right? So I know you can work 60 hours, but they're not going to be your best hours. Come with your ideas, approach a problem in a novel way, figure something out. An intuitive leap could save days of time. And now that we know we have AI at our fingertips and we can kind of run ideas and experiments and see what's generated, I think those ideas are actually even more important. So, you know, psychological safety really has to be a behavior rather than a concept or a value on the wall. People have to, you know, live through the experience of having their ideas work or not work and realize that there's no sanction or penalty, that, you know, it's never going to be a straight line and they're allowed to zig and zag to get there. Yeah, it's definitely, and, you know, just like children, you know, you can say anything, right? As a parent, you'd see this too. You can say lots of things to children. They watch you, they watch and observe, and they learn, take much more from watching what you do rather than listening to your words. And I think it's absolutely the same in a team. If you don't behave that way, it doesn't really matter what you say or is on the wall. So that sort of authenticity and integrity is absolutely vital. Yeah.
And then, so you and Hussein Sharaf, as you mentioned, the CEO of Cloudforce, you've known each other for, I think, over a decade now. Um,
Yep.
yeah,
Way longer.
way longer.
Yeah, yeah, maybe 25 years, 20 years, long
Wow.
time.
How did you both meet? What's the story?
Oh, he's going to hate me telling this story. So when we brought our product out to the US, um, we we made a really large deal, and it was basically for all of USDA, so 26 something agencies, with Deloitte. It was one of the biggest e-recruitment deals ever made here, and it was a really big project. And as an Australian company, we were actually subbed in by an American company to host, and it ended up being hosted by the government. So the Department of Commerce had this small agency called NTIS, and Hussein was actually contracted to them. And he was like the guy that was always going to put his hand up for anything difficult or interesting. He never said no, and he was on the same kind of learning path to do anything. So inevitably, he ended up with our project because they didn't know what to do with it. Like, how do we host this enormous SaaS product that does these high volumes of traffic and data, and, you know, with all of the compliance and everything else that goes along with it? And the same put his hand up. So when we went to implement the first agency, which was Forest Service in Albuquerque, Hussein was on deck to do that. And so we had a call with him in the middle of the night, his time, because it was daytime in Australia. And the CIO of NTIS had put him forward to be the guy. And Hussein sort of logged into his laptop and ultimately ended up falling asleep because it was middle of the night. But, you know, I was pushy and concerned, and so I had a conversation with the CIO saying, "You got to get me someone else. This guy's a bozo," you know. So I actually tried to get him fired off our project. And of course, the CIO was like, "No, like, this guy's our best guy. He's amazing. It was the middle of the night. Like, he's up." And of course, we did, and he was phenomenal. You know, he learned everything there was about our stack and how to build our servers. And we were pushing hardware really hard. So, you know, the Forest Service hire 30,000 firefighters every year, and they do it all at fire season. So you've got, you know, 50,000 applicants all pouring through this system, you know, on a closing date. And he did everything, you know, we needed him to do to basically make that project a success. So we really, you know, we had this insane project. It was to take our Australian recruitment system and adapt it to the US federal hiring law process in 8 months. And Deloitte's were pushing us really hard. They were the other partner on it, and all the competitors were hoping we would crash and burn. They were trying to sabotage us all the way through the project. It was really tough, and it was successful, and we did it, and he was a big part of that. So he got to see my team, you know, doing this amazing feat of software engineering, and, you know, I got to know him well through that. So, you know, we came out of that buddies under fire, and were close ever since. And then when he decided he'd had enough of contracting and wanted to start his own business and start Cloudforce, I was right there at the beginning, did some of his initial work, did the website, saw him on it, saw him right at the beginning. It was really exciting, and just watched him grow year on year. It was an incredible business. Yep.
So how you both are now, you'd never know that that was the first story where it was like it was like Rocky, but then turned around, and now obviously you look at you both together. So it's great.
It was one moment. It was one moment. You know, um, there were there were weeks and months and years in the trenches doing that stuff together, and I think that's where the trust is born. And look, I say to people, having a business partner is like getting married. A large part of your well-being, both financial, reputational, your whole work identity is all very much, enmeshed with that person, and you want to choose really carefully.
And then what have you both learned, or what have you learned from working together over the years?
I mean, yeah, interesting. So I think we have similarities. So we both, just took on the world and took on technology and taught ourselves everything we know and had that same spark. I think what I really love about Hussein, and this is why we're different, right, is that he's just exceptional at the connecting. So he's really good at external connecting. So I'm a real internal builder, so I connect deeply with my teams and work with people deeply at that level. Hussein's really good at doing that at scale. So his network of just business people, Microsoft, all of his customers, he just is able to build very, very high quality relationships with a lot of people and make them all, understand what he's got to offer and keyed in directly to what they need from him, and just does it in such a beautiful way that I think builds enduring business relationships. And I just saw that as an absolute key strength in doing what we're doing today. I love it. Yeah.
What a great partnership. You both complement each other very well.
I hope so. I hope I bring something to the game for him. But yeah, it's a pleasure watching him do his thing. He's really very good at it, and he's had a really strong vision for what kind of company he's wanted to create, and I see that echoed here. It's a consistent sort of culture that everybody can understand and be a part of. It's really nice. Yeah.
And then on to high performing teams, which you're very good at and very passionate about. So I know you spent a lot of your career building engineering teams. What does a truly high performing engine team actually look like in practice?
I so I'll just qualify that. I don't know that I've built a lot of teams. So I think there's probably two that really stood out, but they were very high performing. Like, we produced world class software from a really small team and consistently over years and years and years. So there was success there. I was just lucky to, I guess, find some really exceptional software talent that enjoyed working together. So I mean, I've had plenty of talented people come through the teams that didn't stick. It's not always a given. I think it's, human beings are complex, and sometimes you can have all the skills in the world and even the right attitude, but the context you've got to employ that for, to produce something doesn't always work. So I have seen people come and go, but I think, being connected, shipping quality work consistently so that you build up a really good body of work that you're really proud of. I think pragmatism plays a role. So I've had some incredibly bright people who wrote some amazing things that ultimately were not fit for purpose. And so that the pragmatic programmer is something that I really love. Someone that can see the right amount of effort to put in at the right time to get the right result for that context. So, not always chasing, the ultimate technical solution, but also never cutting corners and making sure it's always good enough. Managing technical debt well. So, people that really care about the long term, the longevity of the application they're working on. And I think having ownership in the product. So this is the difference between, say, a team working at Accenture on a billing system for an energy company that, it might be a 5-year project and everyone's paid extraordinarily well, and there's a lot of highly paid resources all working on the team. So you've got kind of guns in every direction, from requirements to design to architecture to development to sort of testing and release. But those projects are big, they fail often, or they get extended, and requirements, business priorities shift. And I think those environments, people often lack ownership over the whole thing. They just know that they're one piece of a really big machine, and that their individual efforts don't count for a lot, and that if they were to leave, the project would go on. I think having smaller teams that are really intimate with the problem domain and intimate with the end users, knowing that when they release a great upgrade or a feature, that it's going to really improve people's lives, and immediately see that happen. I think that's a really important thing, and I'd say that for any software developer, that's the kind of team, project, and company you want to be a part of, because the satisfaction you get doing that is just orders of magnitude greater than working on bigger, older projects where you're just 3 or 4 layers removed. I mean, if you were to ask a developer, like, have you ever met an end user? Like, do you get to see them? Do you get to talk to them? If the answer is no, then that's possibly a gap. That's something that you're missing out on, that it could be a really good experience. So yeah, and I think just having intimacy in the team, so having people work together on things, having people share ideas, having people learn from each other, communicating really thoroughly within the team and the Scrum and with the product team and users, just keeping everybody really intimate with the with the whole cycle and the whole domain of that product is also really key. But other than that, I mean, it's a one-by-one exercise, really. I've seen plenty of performance management systems and frameworks and approaches, and honestly, it's about understanding each team member really well, knowing how they work, knowing what their strengths are, and just connecting them in a way that makes them work together. I don't think it's something that's easy to do at scale, and it takes a lot of work to bring people from where they are to where you need them to be. But knowing people really well, and just adapting to fit them in. I guess I'm struggling to articulate what is a complex and human process. If I was to run you through the tenure of each of the people on the teams, they'd all be different. And people's lives are also unstatic; they grow and change. So I think it's just good people management, and not treating people like like numbers.
Yeah, I suppose there's not one like secret sauce, or it's just
Yeah, no, I mean, the two things that really drive, I think, performance in teams is, one, being organised. So having those organisers, so having people that can run a Scrum really well, having people that can project manage well, having people that understand release and customer management. So being organised takes a lot of stress out of the world for a developer, right? Because they're much less likely to be ambushed with a requirement that was missed, or a requirement that was misunderstood and needs to be changed quickly, or so you take some of that stress away. So stress is the enemy of creativity, right? When we stress our teams out, they're just much less likely to be creative, and it's the creativity that actually powers the generational leaps and the kind of growth spurts you need. And so if things are well organised and well run, it gives everybody their best chance to do their best work. And then it's about having, I think, management that are intimate with the work. So having your dev leads and dev managers and those people really in the product, in the stack, having your product people in the team with the developers, and then having your customer-facing people as well in the mix. It's just going to give everybody, the full context of what they need. So, yeah.
so it sounds like you place people at their strengths in the right areas, and everyone has their part to play. And then by doing that, obviously, when like you said, it kind of helps the other person, and then they all kind of come together and have this flow state. So I imagine that they bond quite well as well from that.
Yeah, I think it's a very human thing to get pleasure from helping someone. So when people are in a team they enjoy and they respect, not only does it make them feel comfortable, because if they hit some difficulty or some issue, or they just want to share a design thought and have it tested or validated, it's so helpful because you've got another mind on the problem who's coming outside of the context to just see it for what it is and give you some direct feedback. And when you've got people that are all good at what they do, knowing that those people have got your back in those decisions is really liberating. And then people take risks. They like try bigger ideas. They take the leaps, and it's really what you want. So yeah, it is really important.
Yeah, it's a great cover and move environment you create.
Yeah, and part of that is accepting that the whole process of creating software is kind of you know is not it's not a static thing. We supposedly learned it with the Mythical Man Month in the 60s, right? And everyone went, "Oh, we need something better." And then we do agile, and then people go, "Well, I want a date," and so then we need goals, and then people want metrics, and then you want basically agile with waterfall, and then you're back to it all has to happen on this date. And so there's always a tension between the business need and what you need to tell customers and users as to when things are going to happen, and then how it's got to be made. So I think a good software operation knows how to insulate certain parts of that process so that the creative things can still happen, but happen reliably. So yeah.
Nice. And then when you're building a technology organization from scratch or scaling one, what are the first cultural foundations you focus on?
You need good management. So middle management makes it all run. So there's nothing scarier than having a dozen great developers with no one to manage them. So you're almost better starting off with someone that's a really solid practitioner that knows how to manage the process and the tooling and knows how to make developers feel comfortable and well fed and well directed, and then adding developers. So I think a lot of times people start with a couple of developers and then they pick one of the developers that maybe is a bit more senior and then make them the manager. I'd almost say if you want to really get a team up and running quickly is import your management experience, get people that have done it. We spent a long time looking for the right development manager here. And I really wanted someone that had been through the startup process all the way through to scale. And we found someone with that. So it's just comforting because they've had some of those real experiences. Not that they're all going to be immediately applicable, but just that experience and gravitas and calm around decision making just really really helps the team go. So and look, it's changing. So interestingly, really right now we're at a moment of extreme change for software development teams. I mean, there are really large companies who are laying off thousands of people based on just using AI, and I think there's some fear of developing the industry at the same time as it's also unlocking. So I've watched more junior developers skills grow really quickly by using AI. Like it's an amazing learning tool just in and of itself. So I'd hate to say that I don't know, but it really is all changing. And I think the best thing we can do is be adaptable. I think so. To me, if you want to build a resilient team in a business, like the adaptability right now is the key. You need to be able to change. You need to be able to say, hey, the way we were doing all of that testing is changing now because we can now use these new workflows that test it in a very different way at a different level. And the things that we did yesterday aren't as applicable to tomorrow, so we now need to figure this out. So it's a process of experimentation, and I think the people that adapt the quickest will be the people that succeed in this moment.
And how do you stay on top of all like the new tools and everything coming out?
I think the only way is to use them, honestly. Like if you wait to be educated by the market, you'll probably miss the boat because it's the people that are experimenting right now that are figuring this out, that are using them for good effect, that are becoming the practices of tomorrow. And if you waited to see that course pop up on Pluralsight or Microsoft Learn to like explain to you how to use AI, to build things and test things and release things, I think it'll be too late. So I would say, the nice thing is they're pretty cheap, right? So no one's trying to sell you $1,000 a seat license to do this. Everybody can go get an account, for $30 a month and just start using it and see what works. And the interesting thing is, in this moment, it's not so much a tool and a practice as a guide. So you can just ask the AI, like, is there a better way to do this? I'm here in the process. What's next? What is And so there's plenty of people kind of talking about it. If you go out there and consume it, you will see people sharing their approaches. But the tool makers themselves are rapidly folding all of the experiences back into the tools. So if you just keep using them, you'll be using them the way that others have used them only 2 months ago, and we've seen this with Claude Code already. So yeah, just get your hands on them and start using it.
And I suppose, is there any sort of like areas that you would look to find new tools that before they come out to the market that you kind of know that you could pass on to anyone at all?
Look, there are some aggregators of information about AI. I mean, if I suggest just one, I'd say read a newsletter like the Neuron. So it's a daily newsletter that does a roll up. They're very good commentators on the space. They survey users, and I found their reporting to be really clear and direct. You want to stay away from probably the major vendors because they're all flavouring it with their strategy and where they want to go. I think there's this feeling that they can steer people in different directions. But yeah, something like the Neuron, and you'll just see it. And look, Anthropic are now, they're spanking the rest of the market. They've really gone ahead with a lot of things. So I'd say absolutely go use Claude, use Cowork, use Claude Code. Yep, can't go wrong. And that might age like fine wine. I don't know what's going to happen next month. Who knows? There'll be another entrant that does it even better. So just saying, 12th of March, Claude Code.
um, do you, when that happens, do you implement it and use it straight away? Like, are you adapting it within your team? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, to give you an idea of the interesting way it potentiates within a team. So, we set one of the junior developers on a task just to look at some automation we wanted using Claude Cowork. And just today, he was teaching our release manager how to automate release notes in a better way than she'd been doing before. So, you don't know where those things are going to come from, but you have to try them, and you have to have a team that are willing to help each other, right? So that wasn't in his job description. It wasn't tasked to him. He just saw an opportunity to spread that knowledge, and we've taken another step forward. So, but we do that by making people use them. So all our developers have to use them, and the company as a whole has a directive this year to embody the frontier and, actually be the first data point. If we're going to ask customers to come on this journey and use these things, we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I was going to ask you, like, with the rise of AI and all the other assisted coding tools like Copilot and um, Claude Code, as you mentioned, like how you're seeing those tools change the engineering teams at the moment. So I know you mentioned that. Is there any other ways that you're changing or seeing it change?
Yeah, I mean, so first up, there is this whole new discipline of how to use AI tools. So engineers, like developers really had to get good at or better at cloud infrastructure. That was a big change. So we went from just writing code and some other team shipped it to now there was DevOps, and so we were sort of half enmeshed in that. And now like the code also has to orchestrate, infrastructure. So this is just like another thing. Like developers now have to understand how to use AI tools. So it is another whole practice that they've got to get good at. Other than that, interestingly, because it's generating code, so a lot of developers, and I was very much like this, we have our ideas as we write. So it's quite stimulating when you write a line of code because you're kind of thinking ahead, and as you're writing, like it'll actually be part of the process of coming up with ideas. That's changing because now, you know, AI will go read the user stories out of Jira. AI will write a plan. You might iterate over that plan and tweak it and tune it, but it will then go execute on that plan and start writing your code. So you first get heavily involved when there's already a ton of work. So where in previous teams you might have had 5 or 6 developers all writing code and maybe 1 or 2 approvers, like looking at PRs and reading code and then adjusting and tweaking. Now everybody is doing that. So it's like everybody has their own development team. We all run multiple instances of Claude Code. They're doing multiple tasks at the same time. And now we're really just reviewing and we're reading, and we have to kind of make our decisions in a really different context than when we're writing them from scratch. So that's a change. I think there's new bottlenecks. So there's bottlenecks in design. So just because the AI offers to change a bunch of classes and change your software model doesn't mean you should follow that. So there's now a lot more things waiting at that design review and design kind of integration step, as well as coming out the other end in terms of actually approving finished work and bringing it through to release. So it's put a lot of pressure back on kind of QA as well. So yeah, it's changing.
And then if you were to look sort of 5 years ahead, like how do you think tools like this will reshape the structure of engineering teams? Do you think because they're able to be more productive, are they going to be smaller, delivering more? Will they be shift more towards architecture and problem design, or do you think maybe something completely different?
No, look, I mean, you mentioned architecture, right? Even architecture is now under pressure. So I've already seen in our application that you know Claude can suggest some really good, strong architecture changes that previously you would have required someone at a higher level to do. So I don't think that. I think 5 years is an impossible timeline now. Everything has accelerated. 5 years, who knows? Like I don't know. I'd hate to try and pretend that I had any idea of what's going to happen 5 years from today. 5 months from today, we are definitely already seeing changes. I mean, you saw the news with Block. Jack Dorsey, fired 4,000 people, saying, I think he just used the word intelligence because he didn't want to write artificial intelligence or AI, but he's basically asking the remaining 6,000 to do everything that the 10,000 used to do, but with AI. So I think businesses feel a pressure to get a return on AI by replacing people with, with AI tools. So I think that's already happening. Interestingly, I mean, I don't know, like this might be a moment like the Industrial Revolution where we built washing machines and microwaves and said, oh, people are going to have all this free time. Like these machines of convenience will free up the people in the house to like not do the drudge work and just have more time. And all that happened, of course, is people then had to go and get jobs. So you now have a job and you do the washing because you have a washing machine. Is this going to be like that where, now you have to do 3 jobs because with AI, you can do 3 jobs instead of 1. So now everyone just has to have 3 jobs and we're going to make more things. I don't really know. All I know is that, it's a very, like software is very important to the progress of the human race now. And while we might have better tools to make more software, we still have to make like innovative software and the best software. So I don't think AI that's trained on existing knowledge is always going to produce new knowledge. So I think people are still going to be part of that. Yeah, I mean, if I look at, when you apply for, say, an R&D tax grant with the government, you have to demonstrate the new knowledge you've created that wasn't already existing in industry. And that always comes to mind when I look at this. I mean, you can ask AI to hypothesize and think things through, but it's not always going to produce you a new idea or a disruptive idea. And I think technology is very much in a place where you've got to do that anyway to kind of build something new. So we're still going to be required at that level.
Yeah. And then
I mean, I was going to add to that. I mean, if you've ever had a tradesman do a shoddy job of a task you've needed, like a gate fixed or a car, there are going to be plenty of people that use AI and aren't terribly diligent about it. So my advice to people is if you're good at writing software, get good at using AI to write software, you're probably not going to be short of job opportunities.
And do you think if people don't use AI or become like a frontier company, they get left behind?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know if I would have said that 9 months ago because we still weren't sure, but really from December last year onwards, it's becoming pretty apparent that like this is absolutely going to be the way to do it because it's just so useful. I watch developers now running 4, 5, 6, 7 different agents at different times making things, and they just wouldn't have been able to do that, make that much progress that quickly. So it's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. And then for someone starting their career today, what skills would you say for them to focus on developing to stay relevant in AI assisted development world?
Yeah, well, so I saw a really interesting diagram the other day, and it was talking about the disruption to the learning cycle. So when you learn about a concept in development and programming, and you try that thing out, you kind of get this lived experience of seeing it happen in real life. When you're vibe coding, you're sort of missing a piece of that cycle, and it could definitely, um, just take you on a meandering path where you're not really grasping those core concepts. So interestingly, I'd say even though the AI can write you a ton of code, knowing why that code exists, like the why is way more important than the what, I think. So learn the fundamentals. We practice something here called domain-driven design, which is just an approach to creating software that lends itself to stable, sustainable applications over time, where you can refactor and modify them at will, and maintain a level of quality. And those principles aren't obvious unless you know what they are. So I think understanding software development and its core principles, like the solid principles, are still really, really key to wielding it. And in fact, if you think about developers now mostly reviewing code, that's what you've got to practice. Because the code the syntax can look great, right? But being able to make a decision about whether a class should live here or it should be an interface somewhere else, they're kind of the key things. So focus on those. Yeah.
Yeah, so like knowing the plumbing underneath it so that if it's right or wrong, then because you do see a lot of like hallucination sometimes, or even when I use AI, unless you know the actual subject, you sometimes don't push it enough and then realize that it's wrong.
Yeah, and that's the helpful nature of AI. This is what it's trained to do. It's trained to be helpful. So if it feels that being helpful means giving you something rather than nothing, it's going to give you something. But interestingly, lean on AI to teach you. Ask it if is this respecting, you know, like the solid principles of programming. What might be a way to improve it to align with those better, and it will actually go do it for you. But you do have to ask it. Yep.
And then with AI dramatically increasing developers' productivity, what do you think then becomes the real constraint in technology teams, like people, ideas, or leadership?
So I think at this moment of disruption, that that adaptability number one. So teams that are quickly getting around this and understanding it and growing with it as it changes and being ready to keep adapting as the tools keep improving will position them really well. I think the fundamentals of a good team still apply. Having people that are good at organising, good at delivering, good at communicating, that's vital. Um, I think people that have strong ideas and opinions are also very important in this age of, AI will produce something. So knowing when to reject something and when to ask for something better. And also just the why. So what are we building? Why are we building it? What do our customers or users get from it? Making sure that we're still delivering strong value and innovating in a way that's actually going to be meaningful. That's also super important. If anything, there's probably just going to be more noise. So having a stronger signal is going to be great. Doing it really well. Like if everybody can vibe code an application, having an application that's actually extremely reliable and really performant could be a differentiator.
Nice. And then what do you think most engineering teams are getting wrong about AI right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know. It's so new. I do talk to other teams and other people. If anything, it's just not moving fast enough. And it's funny because I may have taken a really different stance even 6 or 12 months ago, but having seen the dramatic shifts internally here, I would worry that people are not embracing it fast enough and really understanding it quickly enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely utilize it and then I guess have a good team around you as well.
Yeah, and making sure that you've got some depth in that design review sort of area where you can keep asking the right questions to get the right design decisions resolved, and not let AI, you know, diffuse your ideas and make it confusing and too broad or too quick, you know, and keeping your sort of conceptual integrity about the application design, because that could quickly get out of hand if you just let everybody, you know, smash out 5 to 10 PRs a day, and within 2 months you have something unrecognizable.
And then bringing it back to the teams again, like when you are hiring engineers or technology leaders, like what do you look for beyond the technical ability?
I think well-rounded people. So, you know, you really want everybody to care a little about everything. You want people to care about the user experience. You want people to care about the quality. You want people to care about performance, care about security, care about, you know, the end user and what they're doing. So you really don't want people that are too narrow or specialised. So especially leadership, you know, you want people that have lived in or have worked in many of the different realms. So you want your architect to understand QA really well. You want your security analyst to understand users really well. You want, you know, your release manager to understand developers really well. You just want people that are well-rounded, that have been exposed to a lot of the SDLC and know what each part does.
And is there certain traits that you see in someone that they succeed in a high performing engine environment at
Yeah, I think apart from the soft skills, so being able to communicate and being able to connect with people in a meaningful way, I think attention to detail is really important. So just knowing that people care about the pixels and care about the speed of a button, or care about the small things. I think when you've got that attention to detail, then the whole thing is going to come out better. Um, yeah.
all? And then, like, what would you say are the most common mistakes leaders make when trying to build high performing engineering teams?
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm not going to pretend to know. I mean, I know mistakes I've made. So, you know, I've hired people that are technically dazzling and ultimately were a complete waste of time and money. um, I've I've hired people that are really friendly but not careful enough. You know, I think again coming back to that well-rounded attention to detail kind of dimension, um, just being selective about that. I also, as you build teams, I think people treat hiring as their job and then leave it up to the team to figure it out. I think what works really well is having members of the team in the recruitment process, so they feel invested in the decision to bring that person on and can be their advocate as they integrate them into the teams. So people that treat recruitment as something separate is, I think, often a mistake. Um,
Nice. And then, do you have like a moment that you can share where a team you built just really clicked and you could feel the difference in performance and you had that flow state?
sure. I mean, going back in time, you know, I had a developer that had learned everything about development from our team. They'd come on board as just a branding HTML type person, but they had really good judgment, and eventually ended up kind of promoting them to kind of be responsible for the merge of our two main code bases and this US project. And having that person in that seat doing that just gave everybody a sense of calm and dependability, so that the really creative people could then fire strongly and make, you know, large leaps in what we needed towards our goals. And just that reconfiguration around that person really helped the team gel. So yeah, I think, and sometimes those opportunities aren't obvious in the beginning. It's only when you look back that you realise that that was a really key accelerator. And, you know, if it was always that apparent who was going to do what really well, like, it would just be easy, right, to manage teams. Um, But I think giving people opportunities to grow and stretch into things based on their base attributes is a really, really good move. Yeah.
Nice. And then I know that you've mentioned David Marquis. I think that's how you say his name. Leadership style reflects the way you think about leadership. What is it about his approach that really resonates with you?
I think his willingness to stand up to the hierarchy, the way hierarchies worked in the military. People get really fixated with hierarchy, especially in the US. I've found, there's a real deference towards seniority and power, and so people get really, I must do that thing because that person was more important, all those sort of things. And just saying to a room full of people, I don't know, is really powerful. And so again, there's this sort of building up of senior leadership here where everyone's a guru, they're amazing, they've done it all. The honest truth is, really, like, it's the body of work that's come from the team as a whole that is what counts, and the leader at the end of the day doesn't really contribute that much. So I think just, you know, the fact that he was willing to say, I want everybody to tell me what they would do and learn from that, and turning what was a crew of 135 people from just blind rule followers and order followers to being thinking, you know, sources of good decisions, good information, and collaboration is key. And I love that, in our teams here where anybody can suggest anything at any time. No one's ever going to go, oh, I didn't say that because that person was in the room or they were important. That's really important. That's, yeah. So I loved his book around that because it was all about the language of intent rather than sort of directives. And I just know my lived experience over 30 years is when you get high performing people that like working together, like they're going to produce amazing results, and you don't have to crack the whip or make them do anything. You just got to be there to help steer it all the way to where you want it to go. And it's a really powerful thing. I mean, I've outperformed teams 10 times, 50 times, 100 times our size. So I believe it. I've seen it.
Yeah, I love the clip that you showed me of where he gives an order and the order's a wrong order, but they listen to him because that's just what they do. And I thought that was just so powerful. And I think, weren't they like the worst performing team? And I think it's just an amazing story, and it's just funny how they all listened even though it was
Well,
wrong.
yeah, I mean, and that's the culture in the military, right? So I'm not saying it's wrong because you've got to organise a million people to go do a thing, so it kind of requires that. But yeah, so the moment was he was on a boat that he hadn't trained on and he didn't understand, and he gave an order to like shift into a second gear or something like that. And the order went from him to a second officer to the helmsman to the guy steering the boat, who just went, I can't, there's no knob I can turn to do that. This boat doesn't have that, right? So just an awful moment. Like someone has said something on high and it's just ridiculously wrong. And he turned to his first officer and said, why did you order him to do that? And he just said, because you told me to. And that was the moment where it clicked for him. That was the epiphany that went, I shouldn't be telling you what to do. If I just asked you, how do we increase speed or whatever the goal was, you could have told me what was appropriate for this boat, this context, and get it done. And that's true. Like the people that work for me are smarter than me. Like I've got some amazing people on my team that I couldn't hold a candle to, and you just get enough people like that in a room, and you can solve pretty much any problem. And I saw that, through the long sort of arc of this previous product. We had many a crisis, and we just had a tiger team. We just pulled in the key people, and we said, "This is the problem." Everyone got around the whiteboard. There was no ego. There was no one had to ask permission, or no one was told they were stupid for suggesting something. And we solved every problem every time, and year in year out, and built an amazing reputation for this product that they still rely on every day. And that's what you get when you just allow people to contribute. And instead of having to be the one that had that idea, this is my thing, it's a reflection of me. Just a little bit of humility goes a long way, a long way.
Yeah, and your leadership style really reminds me of what he says as well about how, other people have great ideas and you want to hear from them. And I know that you really get other people, like you mentioned earlier, the quiet people, you get them to speak up because they might actually have really good ideas as well.
Yeah, very. And I learned that about myself, right? I was always precocious as a child and quick with a fact or an idea, and sometimes the people that hadn't spoken had way better ideas. And I had quite a few moments where I went, I've just got to not say anything right now and find out. And then what I learned from that was if I didn't fill the space, someone else's idea might be much better, and then no one even had to hear my subpar idea. I didn't have to waste any time retracting it. You just go with the best. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And then on leadership, is there any lessons that you've learned the hard way? I know you mentioned some earlier, but is there?
Look, I think it's a highly personal journey. I think, being confident enough to step out in front and attract people and, wave the flag and ask people to come with you. I think that trust is earned over time. Um, Early in my career, I was probably trying to do too much and definitely wanted to please every customer and please every user. And so you do get hardened by those experiences where you realize you've got to do more for the common good, and that might mean some users are not going to be happy with you in this release or the next one, and being able to ride that out and trust that when you get to the end, everyone will get what they need. But it's a highly personal journey. For me, it was, I think, building a product that ultimately became very successful, and knowing that the competitors that I'd worried about, I probably had spent way too much time thinking about, when in fact, if we just not thought about them and kept doing the things we were doing, we were going to beat them anyway. It's very easy to get overwhelmed with the idea of what everyone else is doing. And look, competition is healthy. I look back over that time. We had a major competitor that was local to us as well, and they pushed us really hard, and we pushed them hard, and we made a much better product because of it. So I think competition is absolutely healthy, and knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are, but also just the confidence that you can just make it. So, Cloudforce is not really an enormous business at all. We're now 120 employees, so we're tiny compared to some of our competitors, but we're already gapping them in certain sectors just because, we know how to make reliable software that works really well in a unique way. I mean, from a business perspective, I would say go for uniqueness. If you have something that's unique, it means you're not just competing on price. It means you have a value proposition that might resonate with people in a way that the competitors are not. And it's a really big market. You will find customers and you will build a pretty good business out of it. Yeah, so that confidence has come over time. 30 years in now, I feel better about that today than I did 20 years ago.
That's good. And then at Cloudforce, you talk about democratizing generative AI. What does that actually mean in practice for organizations?
So if you just look in education alone, right, there are going to be, the large, prestigious, well-funded institutions that can buy anything they want, and some of them do. Like there are large unis out there that have bought everything on the market, and their students just get everything they need because they're all paying a lot of money. But then there are, you know, there's a long tail of institutions that don't have those funds. So community colleges, all sorts of ones, right? And they're never going to be able to afford the SaaS products. They can't buy, you know, OpenAI EU licenses for $30 or $20 a head. And so what we give them is something in their own tenant that is a consumption-based model that they can give at one price for all their students, which means that those students don't get left behind. So if you think about, they call it the digital divide, right? If there are students that get access to full AI and everything there is, they're going to accelerate away with their learning and become practitioners. And if there are people that aren't, they're not. And so we aim to bridge that gap. We're going to, do it in a way that's accessible, that's secure. They can have it in their own tenants, and they can give it to all of their students in a way that they wouldn't be able to otherwise afford to do it. And the only other alternative to that is, say, doing it with an open source accelerator. But most organisations do not have the technical know-how to make that into a tier one system for all their users.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're putting everyone on a level playing field. And then also by doing it on consumption, that's so much better because obviously it's only for the people that use it because not everyone uses the tool initially. There's always some people that kind of don't necessarily jump on that curve.
Yeah, correct. And in the education sector, I mean that's going to be led also by faculty and learning design. So as even today, there are professors who are like don't use AI, I'll fail you if you use it, and others that say if you don't use it, you don't get a pass. So there's a whole adoption journey for institutions to figure out how they're going to integrate it into learning and learning design so that students can actually use it in a responsible way. I mean, something that I'm quite passionate about is the education problem, because I really struggled in education. I had ADHD, and I was always looking out the window and thinking of something else. And AI is such a tireless, consistent, presence for students, because it's not going to get annoyed by your questions. It's not going to tell you it's after 10 o'clock, I'll talk to me tomorrow. It's not going to say, well, I spoke to you yesterday, I've got other students. I had that brushed off so many times. And I think AI would have been really helpful to me, and it is today. Even in everything I do right now, it's this life is a one long series of lessons. I think if we shut down on learning anything, we're really not doing ourselves justice. So I think AI is a big part of that.
Do you think that will, because you've got such an entrepreneurial mindset, like the way that you think and do things, do you think that will really help individuals, students who have that mindset at school coming through, and maybe actually help them stay within the education?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I used to love the lessons in the classroom. I'd follow along in math and go, that's really cool, I understand that, I love it. Was never going to do the homework, you know. And so I've already seen some really interesting curriculums come together where, you're actually doing the work as you're absorbing the lessons, and the AI is not giving you answers. It's actually helping you engage with the subject matter. And you come out the other end of that and you've actually learnt it really thoroughly. What a great solution, you know? Yeah. It's almost like the what they call it, the reverse or the flipped classroom, where people, where they would send you home to learn the concepts and come in and do the work together, which makes so much more sense to someone with my learning style. And that's kind of what AI is doing. Yeah.
And I wasn't going to ask this, but I feel like I really want to now. But Nebula One, that was your brainchild, right? Can you tell us the story behind that?
Look, not really. I'd love to take all credit and ownership, but I mean, again, it was partnership with bright people. And I think when the first so when Microsoft did the deal with OpenAI and it was available on Azure, that was when Hussein really looked at it and went, okay, like there's got to be something here. So he and the sort of main architect or the infrastructure architect here kind of sketched out on a napkin what that would look like composed of these services. At the same time, I was working with what was my previous sort of lead developer in the other business on another prototype for the same end. And once we gave that to Hussein, and he, with all his charm and charisma and connection in the business world, started showing that to people, it really lit the fire. And it was the combination of Hussein's understanding of the appeal of this to people, the infrastructure architect's kind of vision for how it was going to be composed of the services, and our software minds that put together a prototype that worked and was compelling for people, that was immediately white labeled, and those things that make it appeal to business people, that all came together. So yeah. And I mean, look, in the beginning it was only a couple of us working on it. It's myself and this guy, but quickly we added people, and now it's the output of all the many fine minds in my team.
And was there a point that, like, did you always know that you were onto something and it was kind of take off the way it has? Or?
Pretty much as soon as we made something that let people start using these AI services, because that was the rub, right? Azure, they released OpenAI on Azure and on these things, but you had to build something. And yes, you could go off and just use ChatGPT, but it wasn't yours, and it wasn't to your use case. So as soon as we built something on top of Azure that people could actually consume and do things with, that's what really kicked it all off, and that's what they do today.
Yeah, I think it's great because then all the plumbing and governance and all of that is within your environment and you kind of know what it is.
Clean water. It's like clean water. Everybody needs it.
Definitely. And then from a CTO perspective, how important is infrastructure and cloud architecture in making AI actually work?
Well, if you want to do it yourself, vital. So, you know, I think one of the reasons we're growing so quickly is that we offer people an alternative to just buying another SaaS product. So it really is yours. It goes in your tenant. I mean, that's powerful. To me, as a previous SaaS vendor, it's kind of terrifying because I don't have a production environment. So I can't go and look at your data and fix things for you because it's in your tenant. I can't see it, right? We've got to ship extremely reliable software because it's going to go off into your tenant and live. And so the way that that's composed to get through procurement, to get through, security review, and also to not risk, anyone else's data is extremely important. So it's lucky that Cloudforce's roots are in infrastructure, right? As a specialist, as your kind of migration shop and technical specialists, we actually have a really strong bench to begin with to do all that stuff. So it was a match made in heaven.
It's like a nice transition as well.
Yeah.
And then for engineers or leaders listening who want to become CTOs one day, and especially like now with everything changing so fast, what skills would you suggest that they should be investing in now?
I mean, so a CTO is always going to be something different to every organization, but to be an executive, you must have strong business credentials. Like you've got to understand how a business makes money, how technology impacts that, whether it's a driver of revenue or a way to manage cost or protect margin. You've got to be across security. It's a pretty multi sort of disciplinary position, and so I think my beginnings in entrepreneurship of starting businesses and doing that and having to go find the money, like go get it from a market. So in a few businesses, I actually had to develop a market, which meant educating people, and that's a very expensive and lengthy exercise. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. It's kind of difficult, and then of course, as soon as you've started that market, other competitors can come in later and swoop in on all the good work you've done. But understanding what matters to the business from a technical perspective is just really important, and having a good grasp on all the really key metrics that matter. So I look back at my tenure, like I've been really proud to have never had a data loss incident, never had a breach. Those things can be extinction level events for products if you're in a sensitive industry or there are strong competitors. Also having an eye on differentiation around why will someone choose you. If you're easily substituted for something else, you're in trouble. If there's an alternate that's easy, you're also in trouble competing on price. So just being business aware and knowing how to translate what the business impact of a technical decision would be, both down to the team, this is why this is important, or up to the board or up to the C-suite in terms of this is why this is important. I'll give you an example. So recent executive meeting here, we're looking at metrics that need to kind of describe the momentum of the business and what we really want to measure. And from my seat, one of them is the ratio of technical debt to new features. And I know that through bitter experience of having to redevelop things over in the past. But to the uninitiated, so to the group here who hadn't been on within a product group before, it just sounded like a technical irrelevancy. And I had to kind of say, this is actually really important. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, you would want to keep asking whoever took this job about this from time to time, because you would want to know that you're not going to get that board meeting where he stands up and says, we have to start over or have to build a new platform. We can no longer add features to it. So yeah, just being able to translate things up and down is really important.
And I suppose it sounds like having a good experience like you've had. So like when you went back to that time of where you said you had that experience with technical debt, it's put you in such a good position now where you kind of saw the grey area that maybe no other one else did and kind of saved them.
Well, and more, I know it's important. So we manage it through everything we do, and just having a metric to report on it gives that visibility to everyone else. So you're right. I mean, it's why I guess it's harder to break into these types of roles, because sometimes it's the experience that counts. And so if you're competing with people that have all that experience, it's hard to say, take a risk on me. But, if you're in a senior technical role and you're looking to those next career steps up, look at the things that you don't do or that you're not aware of, go talk to the CFO, go talk to the operations officer, go talk to the other areas of the business, and really round yourself out so that you can draw the lines between the things that you manage and the decisions that you make and the things that impact everyone else, and how those need to be communicated. Be a good citizen. Don't be an island of no.
Just go and do all the hard things. So I heard that you like Malaysian food. I've heard it's one of your favorites.
I do. I do. I, yeah, I went to school in Malaysia when I was younger, so I was actually born overseas, and I went to boarding school in Malaysia for quite a few years. And it was a formative time. You develop those tastes young. So now that I'm very drawn to it, and it also makes me very fussy if it's not good.
Really, so you know the good ones, which is good.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And I suppose if you were recommending someone a Malaysian cuisine, like they're going to have it for the first time, what would you suggest?
Curry laksa. So there's a coconut curry soup, or like broth with miso and seafood. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And if they make it right, it has a little film of orange, like prawn oil on top, which is just very aromatic, and it's incredible. So yeah, go for that.
Nice, we'll have to give that a go. Was that a great experience when you were at school there? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, and look, when you're young, so that was the first school I went to. You don't have no context. So I grew up in the jungle. It was this school in the Cameron Highlands, up, it's maybe 6 hours out from KL, and like looking back on it, it was kind of wonderful. Like it was in the jungle. We walked all the time, saw amazing wildlife. It was a pretty interesting experience. But as a kid, that was just normal. So I just thought that's what everyone did. Right? It wasn't until I came back to the Western world when I was 11 that I went, oh, like this is different. Right? You get to go home every day. I'd never seen TV or movies. Like I was like out of the jungle. And that was not an easy transition. But
Yeah.
looking back, it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Do you ever go back at all and visit?
Look, I haven't. I haven't. Things got busy in Australia. I had my own family. Then I've been travelling for work. It's on the bucket list. I will get back there, but not yet.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then before we sort of wrap up, what's something next coming in AI, cloud, or engineering leadership that you think organizations should be paying close attention to now?
I think. I think the next frontier. The reason that AI tooling and like the adoption of AI has shot ahead in software development is because developers install it as their tool, right? So it's something intimate in their environment that can read the code they work on, can talk to the systems they care about, like Jira and GitHub, and can basically can work like they do. That hasn't happened with all the other professions yet, I don't think, right? So there's no Claude Recruit where it's got access to everything that you do and every conversation you have. I mean, there is AI in SaaS products out there, and there are sort of AI-driven platforms, but it's not as deep. I think that's going to happen. So you'll end up with, financial and operations and HR with sort of AI at the middle of things. So if anything, I'd say look at the way AI is now dominating software development and engineering, and just imagine how that's going to dominate your profession, your sector, what you do, because I think there's no doubt that's going to happen.
Yeah. Do you think it will happen, I suppose, this year, or is it kind of too hard to say?
Yeah, I don't know because I haven't looked hard at the other sectors, but I would imagine it's not far off. So there's already Claude Cowork. I don't know, Microsoft pushed hard with Copilot to sort of mix success, but I think it's inevitable. So I don't know how long exactly. And while people have kind of predicted the end of SaaS as there was the SaaS apocalypse, although they've started to bounce back. The truth is there's a ton of business logic and business kind of IP that exists outside of AI right now, but it will merge. So it will become the way we do everything. Yeah.
Nice. And then Is there anything that you think most organizations are underestimating right now at all?
I, I don't know. I'm happy to say I don't know. Um, various times in the past 12 months, I've been really wrong with my own assumptions, where I've thought that's going to be really difficult for that to happen, then it did, or that should be easy, that's just going to happen, then it didn't. So I think it's a pretty disruptive time, and I don't really know. I just know that it's going to keep changing. So I think if nothing else, just expect more change.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, and it's really inspiring to hear your journey and also get your insight as well.
Thanks for having me on, Nicola. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I just love the way you do what you do, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. So thanks for having me.